thank everybody for being out here early and giving up an extra half an hour of sleep. And anybody that joins us on YouTube, thanks for being here. Thanks to the Folk School for letting us get together and have some fun and build and play some cigar box guitars. When I was a kid, I thought that was my theme song. I was born in the plains of Oklahoma, and I grew up out there where if you got up on a horse, you could see 40 miles. If you stood on the ground, you could see 20. Anyway, we had a ranch out there, and we lived so far out in the boonies that you had to go toward town to hunt. And we were really, really poor.
How poor were you?
We were so poor we couldn't afford a chimney, and my brother and I had to carry the smoke out every morning in buckets. But when we got older, we were still poor.
How poor were you?
Well, when they built KFC, which used to be, remember, called Kentucky Fried Chicken, Mother would take us down to the Kentucky Fried Chicken place and let us lick other people's fingers. Well, that's not enough about me, so I wrote a little song called 1945, and to just kind of tell you about what it was like growing up out there on the prairie in the plains of Oklahoma. Way back in 45, near the town of Ross, was a little shack out on the plains. There was a boy, his name was Bart, and I grew up holding a set of reins. By the time I was 10 years old, I was out herding cattle on my own. I had a big gray horse and a mixed breed dog. Together we'd move the cattle every morning. I remember one beautiful spring morning when a boy's fancy turns to skipping school. And my dad let me put the cattle out in the west pasture, which was close to the crossroads. Now, my brother and I could cut cross country to the little schoolhouse we went to. It was a cross country on a kind of a goat trail, was about a mile and a half. But if we took the school bus, it would go way out and around. So sometimes when the school bus broke down, you'd have to walk farther to school. But I walked down, because you could ride with my friends and all that, down to the crossroads. And I was standing there one morning, and this city car pulled up. And I could tell it was a city car because it didn't have mud grips on it. And this lady rolled down the window and said, "Hey, boy," said, "how come that cow doesn't have any horns?" I thought, well, I'll just educate this stupid city woman. I said, there are 3 reasons that cows don't have horns. Number 1 is there's some breeds that just don't have any horns, and that's like an Angus. Never been an Angus born that has horns. Some people that live on the big ranches and have some money can have them chemically treated when a calf is born so they don't develop horns. And then other people dehorn them, and that keeps them from skinning up other cows or hurting you and that kind of stuff. But lady, the reason that one doesn't is because it's a horse. Then one stormy night, a tornado came along and tore that little house all apart. So we packed up and moved to Texas, where rodeo stole my little heart. About the second time a tornado tore our house down, my dad said, enough of Oklahoma. He grew up in Texas. Mother was from Oklahoma. And after World War II, the land was cheap in Oklahoma because it was still so poor left over from the Dust Bowl days. So we moved down to Texas, and that was great for me because Texas introduced me to high school rodeo. My math teacher was a professional roper. He taught in the winter time, and then he traveled the rodeo circuit in the summer, and so I started bronc riding. But anyway, we were heading down there, and right between Oklahoma and Texas is a lake called Lake Texhoma. Now, we call it Okotex Lake, but evidently a boat had sunk, and it's the first time I'd ever seen a scuba diver. So Dad stopped and let us watch. And you know why they sit on the side of the boat? You know why scuba divers fall into the boat backwards? If they fall forward, it smashes their face into the boat. Well, we we got down to Texas, and like I say, I love the rodeoing, but the problem is those Texas boys, they bragged about how big everything was in Texas. They asked me, said, how big was that little old ranch you grew up on in Oklahoma? And I said, we had a whole section of land. The kid goes, that's nothing. He said, I can get in my pickup and drive all day and never get to the other side of my ranch. I said, I had a pickup like that once. As I sit here today, many miles away from the place I rode my pony under the stars, I now live in mountain land, and I just build cigar box guitars. We had a great time down there. I had a friend of mine that was bull riding, and how you get to be a bull rider is you start riding broncs, and you fill up your mouth with marbles. And every time you ride a bronc, you spit out a marble. When you've lost all your marbles, then you can ride bulls. In fact is, the only reason to be a bull rider is a good way to meet nurses. Well, anyway, he had this old pickup, and it had about 175,000 miles on it, which back in those days, that was a lot of miles. Well, he was trying to sell it because we were all traveling the rodeo circuit, but not everybody going to the same ones, and so a friend of his, one of the clowns at the rodeo, said, I know a guy that can roll the mileage back on that truck. And he said, well, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'll be able to sell it. So it was a couple of months before I saw him again at a rodeo down in Refugio, Texas, and he was still driving that truck. And I said, I thought you were going to sell that truck. And he looked right at me and he goes, what? Sell a truck with only 65,000 miles on it? And I have to tell you something about bull riders. All right, you notice I changed cigar box guitars. Now, most cigar box guitars are tuned G-D-G, which is an open G chord. But there are a lot of other tunings to guitar, and this one is tuned a little bit different. It is A, D, F sharp. So it is in the key of D. And like I said, I was not much of a roper, but I did love riding broncs. So Chris Ledoux, if you don't know who he is, he's a country singer. He wrote a song called Re-Ride. Re-Ride is if the horse does something or you get fouled, like hit by the gate or something like that, and it messes up your ride that you're riding for money, right? They give you another chance to ride another horse. And he wrote this song, kind of reminds me of learning to be a bronc rider. Ever since I saw that rodeo in 1955, had to try to be the greatest bareback rider alive. Went and did some practicing on pozo rope and mare. Took that bronc and drawed and really thought I'd part his hair. Now actually that's not really how I learned. The way I learned is I had an Apache girlfriend. I'm part Apache. My dad really looks at the only good thing I got out of being an Apache is still got a full head of hair. But anyway, I had this Apache girlfriend named Tish. Now, if you go on the internet, you can look at the Apache language and you'll find out Tish means rattlesnake. And that just pretty much matched her personality, except she was more like a rattlesnake with a toothache. The thing about it is I'd get her to lay down on the ground and I'd sit down and I'd straddle over and I'd lean down and I'd kiss her and I'd say, you don't kiss as good as your sister, and then I'd try to hang on for 8 seconds. They opened up the gate, he did a double flip. Halfway through the second one was when I lost my grip. I hooked my spurs in the D's and hummed with all my might. I held my breath, he chinned the moon and sucked back to the ride. My boots came off and went a-sailing right up in the stands. My belt, it broke, it shattered my watch, and I lost my wedding band. I scattered all my cigarettes, my shirt dripped down the back. Sure was getting dizzy and I thought my neck would crack. I rode him several jumps, both hands high in the air. He jumped into an old light pole, made party company there. I fell into some muddy slop, he stomped right through my side. Thought he'd busted all my career in bronc riding, and the reason I quit, I was about 25 years old, and I got to be a really upper echelon in the South Texas Circuit bronc rider. And so I got, you know, when you get good, the problem is you begin to show off, and that's when you get in trouble. Well, when the 8-second whistle would blow, I would let go of the rig, because you got to keep your hand in the air. I'd grab my hat, wave at the crowd. As the horse bucked, I would hop off the horse onto the ground. Well, I jumped off the horse one day, stumbled, and stuck a spur into my tailbone, and I promised God that if I could crawl over to the edge of the arena without crying or throwing up, I wouldn't get on another bronc. And guess what? I haven't been on another one since the day. But like I say, I grew up out there, and herding cattle is not like the movies. It's really a nasty, dirty job. And Johnny Cash had a song out called Ghost Riders in the Sky. And Ghost Riders in the Sky is, if you live a bad life, then you're going to be punished by having to herd the devil's cattle through the skies for eternity. Well, that was all well and good growing up out west, and everybody knew what it was, and you know, that ought to just scare you into some religion. Well, I moved into the tail end of the Appalachians down here in North Georgia, and folks down there just didn't have the appreciation for that song. And so, I better get the right guitar here. So what I did is I heard the fella come up with an idea, and I liked it because it seemed to explain to these folks up here, because in North Georgia there are a lot of chicken houses. A chicken farmer went out on his farm one day. He paused by his coop as he went along his way. All at once his rotten egg hit him in the eye. It was a sight he dreaded, ghost chickens in the sky. He'd been a chicken farmer since he was 24, cooking for the colonel 30 years or more, killing all them chickens and sending them to cry. Now they want revenge, ghost chickens in the sky. Ghost chickens in the sky. Their beaks were black and shiny, their eyes were blazing red. These chickens had no feathers, 'cause these chickens all were dead. They picked up the farmer and he died by the claw. They cooked him extra crispy and served him with coleslaw. Ghost chickens in the sky. Almost makes you feel sorry for him, doesn't it? Well, listen, my last name, I go by Cigar Box Bart, and my last name is Mitcham. Well, in 1958, a movie came out called Thunder Road, starring Robert Mitcham. Well, like I say, actually we were able to scrape some money together and get to go see that movie. And so Thunder Road was about moonshining and mountain. First time I'd seen those kind of trees and rivers that actually ran water all year long instead of just during the flash floods. So I got real interested in that, and that's kind of one of the reasons where I live. But the theme song to Thunder Road is an interesting little song. Robert Mitcham actually sings it. I was amazed. He's really a pretty good singer. But anyway, so I got to, the only moonshiner I knew growing up was an old guy. His name was Uncle Joe. He lived in the north end of the county, of Pontotoc County, and everybody knew he was a moonshiner. The sheriff didn't bother him. because Sheriff probably bought the moonshine there. But Uncle Joe, don't know how he was. He looked like probably 118, 120. And you'd see him walking in from town carrying a big bag of sugar on his shoulder. And if you tried to offer him a ride, he'd go, "No, thank you, sir, I'm going this way." And he'd head off out into the woods. Well, one day he'd cooked up a big batch of moonshine, and he figured that he'd gotten it really extra strong. So he came into the county seat, which was Ada, Oklahoma, and there with two barbers there. One was Stewart's barbershop and one was Tate's barbershop. Well, Mr. Stewart was out on the front of the barbershop sweeping up, and Uncle Joe came up to him and said, "Hey," he said, I got this new moonshine. I would like you to try it for me." And Mr. Stewart said, "No, I don't want it on my breath." And so he handed him the jug and held the shotgun on him and said, "I said, taste the moonshine." So Mr. Stewart took a swig and, whoa, it was bad. He said, "Take a big swig." He did, and it almost went down to his knees. So then Uncle Joe grabbed the jug back, handed him the shotgun. "Now hold it on me and make me try it." I can tell you a story, I can tell it all, about a mountain boy who ran illegal alcohol. His daddy made the whiskey, son he drove the load. When his engine roared, they called the highway Thunder Road. All right, I'm going to change the words here a little bit, so I hope you appreciate it. Yes. Sometimes into Asheville, sometimes Brass Town, the revenue has chased him, but they couldn't run him down. Each time they thought they had him, his engine would explode. He'd drive right by like they was standing still on Thunder Road. And there's thunder, thunder over Thunder Road. Thunder was his engine, white lightning was his load. There's moonshine, moonshine, quench the devil thirst. The lawmen swore they'd get him, but the devil got him first. When I was living in Texas, we had dry counties and wet counties. Well, I lived in a dry county, but about 9 inches across the county line was a honky-tonk bar called the Top Rail. Now, it was so rough that if you went there on a Friday or Saturday night and you didn't have a gun or a knife, they issued one at the door. But our county sheriff decided that, hey, he wanted to get some of that DUI revenue. So he sent one of his deputies out there to sit just up the road from the Top Rail, and the bars closed at 2 o'clock in the morning. So just about 2 o'clock, Bert Hawkins came staggering out of the Top Rail, stumbling around, trying to get in his pickup, dropped his keys on the ground, gets down, crawls around, finally gets his keys, gets in the truck, flips on the windshield wipers, finally gets them off, gets the headlights on, pulls out on the road, and of course just about half a mile inside the county line he gets pulled over. And the deputy comes out and said, "Bert, I need you to come back here. I'm going to have to give you a field sobriety test." So he says, "All right." So he gets out and gets around to the back of the truck. He says, "I want you to stand on one leg, hold your foot up about 6 inches off the ground for 30 seconds. So Bert does it, not a bit of trouble. Looks like somewhere in his background had been a flamingo bred into that family. Doesn't move at all, and that just kind of stumps the deputy. He says, "All right, I want you to close your eyes, tip your head back, put your arms out, and I want you to touch the tip of your nose like this." Well, Bert looks like a 55 Buick windshield, just with the wipers going. So the deputy now is completely frustrated. He says, "Look, I saw you stagger out of the bar. I saw you drop your keys. I saw you have trouble getting a pickup. Now you pass all the tests. What is going on?" He said, "Well, I haven't had anything to drink." "You haven't had anything to drink?" He said, "No, tonight I'm the designated decoy." Roaring out of Harlan, revving up his mill, he shot the gap at Cumberland, then screamed by Maynardville. G-men on his taillights, roadblocks up ahead. The mountain boy took roads that even angels feared to tread. And there's moonshine, moonshine, to quench the devil's thirst. that's just a little short version. That song is a lot longer than that, but I just wanted to tell you some of those little stories about it. The friend of mine, dad owned a bar, and he said they sold moonshine underneath the bar, and he said there was this fellow that came in from the steel mill every day, and he'd come in and he'd sit down at the bar and he'd take out a picture out of his pocket and he'd look at it and put it back in his pocket and say, I want a shot of moonshine. So he'd take it and he said, pull out the picture, look at it, and say, give me another one. So after about 2 or 3 weeks of him doing this, the bartender finally said, I got to ask you a question. Why is it that you look at that picture every time that you order a shot? He said, well, that's a picture of my wife, and when she looks good, I go home. So, guys, we sometimes we kind of get in trouble by what we say, and I know that like I have a friend that's a judge, and he had this lady come into his court for stealing. She was stealing groceries out of the grocery store. So he said, ma'am, he said, what'd you steal? And she said, I stole a can of peaches. And he said, well, how many peaches were in the can? And she said, 6. And he goes, okay, 6 days in jail. And her husband pops up and goes, she stole a box of grits too. Now, I have to be careful with my wife. Sometimes she gets mad. This is what I said to her one time. Put another log on the fire. Cook me up some bacon and some beans. Go out to the car and change the tire. Wash my socks and sew my old blue jeans. Cook me up another pot of tea. Put another log on the fire. They come and tell me why you're leaving me. You know, there was a guy that lived a few miles down the road down here. He'd been single a long time, and there weren't a lot of women to date. So he came into Murphy, and he put an ad in the paper that said, wife wanted, mail general delivery, Murphy, North Carolina. Well, he came back about a week later, and the mailbox was just jammed up with letters. He had like 62 letters. All of them for men saying, you can have mine. Let's see, I even forgot where I am now. We were doing... Oh, I can't even think of well, the next verse starts. But anyway, we're going to be in trouble here this morning. And been a long week. We've been having fun here building cigar box guitars at the folk school. And I told you about this one being tuned to D and this one being tuned to G. But the nice thing about a cigar box guitar is, and you see all these others here, is this is tuned to G, but I told you this is G, D, G. But you can take a ukulele, and this is same thing, G, D, G, and the bottom string is B, which is in the G chord. And so the same fingerings will work. The reason I got started doing this is I was working on my garage door, and the clip holding the garage door spring broke, and it crushed this knuckle. I used to play 12-string guitar in a band, and I couldn't bend this finger more than about that much for about 2 years. So I remembered when I was down in New Orleans back in the 60s, watching these old black blues players playing these guitars with a slide, and they were tuned to open G. And a lot of them didn't have regular guitars. They had tin cans. In fact, as I wrote a song called one time, all you need is a box of sticks and strings. And that's what they do, is they jam a broom handle in or whatever. But this is played, you can play it all. But there was a guitar player a few years ago, back in the 60s, and some of you older people might even remember his name, who he played for. He played for a little band that was kind of popular back then. His name was Keith Richards. Well, I saw an interview with Keith Richards on TV one time, and Keith Richards, if you look at some of the videos, Keith Richards would, he played his guitar tuned the same way in open G. But what he did, he didn't like the bass string, so while he was in the interview, he unscrewed it, took it around, and put it under his foot. And if he's on stage, if you look really carefully at his videos, he'll only have 5 strings on his strict string guitar. But here's the same thing. All right? So if you learn to play a cigar box guitar, which is so easy your mother-in-law can do it, you can transfer it to a 6-string. You can just about do it to everything except for a stand-up bass or a violin, because they have a rounded set of strings. You can't bar chord it with a slide. But anyway, as we're running out of time here this morning, I wanted to thank everybody for being here, and I want to tell everybody, before you forget, tonight Ash Devine will be having a concert here. You need to catch her. Super talented lady. And if you really don't want to be stupid like me and try to play with one finger, she teaches this, and you need to take one of her classes if you ever get the chance, whether it's oud or whether it's a guitar class or whatever. Thank you everybody for being here. I see it's time on the clock on the wall for the end of the show. So again, thanks everybody for being here. I do have cards up here. Are there any Vietnam vets? If you have a Vietnam vet in your family that's a survivor that served overseas, I have an album called Flying the Skies of Vietnam, A Trip Down Misery Lane. It's the songs that we sang over there. I'm either the co-writer or the writer of all these songs, and except for one on here. But it kind of explains what we did over there from the air side. So if you have a Vietnam vet in your family or you served there, please take one of these for free. Thank you. And I'll see you at breakfast. Goodbye to the internet.